Once upon a time, there was a young king named Dike. He was a good and kind king, and his people loved him. King Dike had a beautiful wife named Ogi. They had been married for 15 years, and together they had 6 daughters. King Dike loved his wife and daughters very much, but deep in his heart, he felt sad because he did not have a son. He hoped his son would come from his beloved wife, Ogi. So he waited and prayed year after year for her to give him a male child. As time went by, the elders of the kingdom began to worry. They believed that a king should have a male child to take over the throne. One day, they came to King Dike with advice. They told him that he should marry another wife. They thought that a second wife might give him the son he wanted. King Dike listened carefully to the elders. He knew they wanted the best for him and the kingdom. He also knew they were right about the fact that he was getting old. Time was passing, and he feared that if he had a son when he was much older, he might not have the strength to raise and guide him properly. But King Dike was a thoughtful man. He knew that marrying a second wife did not guarantee that he would have a son. Even if he married more wives, there was no promise that any of them would give him a male child. He remembered the story of a man in their land who had married 5 wives. The man had hoped for a son, but ended up having only daughters from all his wives. The man grew old and died without ever having the son he wanted. King Dike did not want to follow the same path. He did not want people to remember him as a king who married many wives and still did not have a son. He thought long and hard about the advice of the elders. In the end, he decided that he would not take another wife. One night, Queen Oge told the king to take another wife. King Dike was shocked. He could not understand why his wife would say such a thing. He had never made her feel bad about not giving him a son. He always knew that the gender of a child was not something she could control. He looked at her, confused, wondering what had made her say this. Oge saw the surprise in her husband's eyes and explained that it hurt her to see him so sad. She confessed that she had overheard the conversation he had with the elders about having a son, and it made her feel bad to see him worried. King Dike was slightly upset by this. He told her that marrying another wife would not guarantee a son. He added that he wanted his son to come from her, the woman he loved so much. But to his surprise, Ogi fell to her knees, almost in tears, begging him to think about her words. Dike hated seeing his wife hurt, so he promised to think about it, even though he was not sure. Ogi, now smiling, told him about one of her maids named Inkiru. She said Inkiru had 9 brothers and was the only girl. That Inkiru's mother, too, was the only girl with 11 brothers. The next day, Queen Ogi brought Inkiru before the king. Inkiru already knew the reason she was being brought to him. The queen had told her that the king wanted to take another wife. King Dike's expression remained calm, but inside he was troubled. He had only promised to think about the matter, yet it seemed his wife had already made up her mind. He did not want to rush such a serious decision. He gave Inkiru a chance to speak about herself, and she did so with great respect and humility, explaining her background and how she came to serve in the palace. From that day on, Queen Oge began to treat Nkiru differently. She told her that she would no longer work as a maid, but should learn the ways of royalty. Nkiru was amazed by the change in her life. She was given fine clothes, beautiful jewelry, and special treatment. She no longer had to do hard work. Instead, she was pampered and looked after like a princess. 3 weeks had passed since she started learning the ways of royalty, and Nkiru noticed that not once had King Dike shown any interest in her. Every time he looked at her, it was as if she was just a stranger to him. He always looked at Queen Oge with so much love and affection, but he didn't even glance at Nkiru with any hint of desire, not even the kind of lustful look that might have been expected from a man towards a young and beautiful woman with a well shaped figure. Nkiru had hoped that, at least, even if he didn't look at her with love, he should do so with lust. But he didn't. This made Nkiru feel sad. She did not want to be married to a man who didn't care about her, a man who would never look at her with any affection. Nkiru decided to talk to her friend Ifebuchi, who also worked in the palace as a maid. Ifebuchi was her closest friend, and Nkiru trusted her. After sharing her worries with Ifebuchi told her that no man in his right mind would see a young and beautiful woman like Nkiru and not be drawn to her. She pointed out how unusual it was that the king, despite not having a son after 15 years, still looked at Queen Oge with such deep love and affection. Then, lowering her voice, Ifebuchi said that Queen Oge might have used a love spell on the king to keep his heart tied to her alone. Because how else could one explain his unwavering devotion to a woman who had failed to give him a male child? These words settled deeply in Nkiru's mind, planting seeds of doubt and suspicion. She thought hard about what Ifebuchi had said. The more she reflected, the more convinced she became that something unnatural was at play. Seeing that Nkiru was convinced, Ifebuchi leaned closer and revealed that she knew of a powerful chief priest who could give her a strong love potion that would bind the king's heart to Nkiru. Ifebuchi urged her to act quickly, reminding her that in 7 days she would be married to the king. She advised that this was the only way Nkiru could win the king's love and secure her place as his wife. Nkiru felt confused and worried. She did not like the idea of using a charm, but the thought of living in the palace without the king's love made her feel even worse. That night, the words of Ifebuchi echoed in her mind, filling her with doubt, fear, and determination. She wrestled with her thoughts, wondering if taking such a step was the right thing to do. But as the hours passed, her desperation grew stronger. She wanted the king to love her, to see her as more than just a second wife brought to fulfill a duty. By morning, her mind was made up. She decided to get the love spell. Nkiru approached Queen Oge and asked for permission to take a walk. She insisted on going with just one maid, choosing Ifebuchi to be that maid. With no suspicion, the queen allowed it. As soon as they were far from the palace, Ifebuchi led her to the chief priest's shrine, hidden deep in the forest. The chief priest, after listening to Nkiru, prepared a charm. When he handed it to her, he gave strict instructions. The charm needed to be hidden in the room where the king would make love to her. Once the act was complete, the king's heart would be bound to hers. Then, To ensure the spell's power remained strong, she must bury the charm somewhere in the palace grounds where no one would ever find it. Only then would the love spell remain unbroken. A few days later, the long anticipated wedding took place. Nkiru became the king's second wife. After the celebration, Nkiru returned to her hut, where she was to spend her first night as the king's wife. She looked up at the thatched roof where she had carefully hidden the charm, directly above the bed. Her heart pounded as she waited, knowing this was her chance to secure the king's love. Later that night, King Dike entered her hut. Nkiru lay on the bed feeling nervous, but she tried to appear composed. As the king approached her, ready to fulfill his duty as her husband, the charm, hidden in the thatched roof, loosened from its place and landed directly on the bed. Nkiru's heart sank as she stared at the charm, exposed for the king to see. The king picked it up. He looked at it carefully and soon realized it was a charm, though he did not know what it was meant for. His face became serious and suspicion filled his eyes. He turned to Nkiru, expecting her to explain. Nkiru's hands shook as she stood frozen, unable to say a word. Tears began to roll down her cheeks and she started crying, saying she was sorry. His voice grew loud and commanding as he ordered her to speak. Feeling scared of what he might do to her, Nkiru had no choice but to confess everything. The next morning, the king called for a meeting with his elders. Everyone could feel the seriousness in his tone as he told them what had happened. Then, the king declared that Nkiru could no longer remain his wife. That same day, Nkiru was sent out of the palace. Days later, the king called for a meeting with his elders. He said that whoever married his first daughter would become the king and she would rule beside him as queen. With that, the king never worried himself about not having a male child.